Hey,
Are we here?
we are live, baby.
Oh, we're here.
hmm
Didn't
I
know
thought we
that.
were there.
Oh, oh, you always think we're there. And
Mm.
I'm always trying to bring you back to the here because it's all about being in the moment, being present, Michael. Be
Yeah,
here.
be
Be
here
here
now.
right now. Be here now, as Ram Dass said.
I want to start off with a quick shout out to Coolio. Rest in peace.
Indeed. 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 I posted on Twitter today some of the lyrics from Gangster's Paradise, and I had forgotten that he has an incredible, I think it's like a 5-line basically analysis almost of both the welfare state and the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about it begins with I was raised by the state, and it goes on to say that he had to basically join a gang and live a life of crime, which meant he had a very short lifespan. And raised by the state, right? I mean, I have said this for a long time. Poor Black people in this country since the 1960s have been made wards of the state because they are, when they get up in the morning, they wake up in public housing, they go to school on public transportation, they go to a public school. On their way home from school, they're likely to encounter a police officer, an agent of the state. When they get home from school, their mom might very well be sitting at the kitchen table with a social worker who is determining what she has in her refrigerator, how many men she is having sex with, so that she can continue to get her welfare payments. And then, as we know, a huge percentage of poor Black men, especially, end up in prison. So to say they're raised by the state is an understatement. And Coolio is one of the first people to, or one of the only people I've heard to say that, but it's quite brilliant. And then he says, because of that, there's nothing left. There's very little out there for us except to join a gang and to deal drugs, and which of course results in violence and death and incarceration. He says all of that in about 4 lines in that song that no one ever mentions or talks about, but I wanted to pay tribute to that. He was a thinker, like, by the way, like most rappers of my generation. Unlike rappers today who, I'm sorry to keep sounding like an old man, but it's just true, there's been a massive degradation of hip hop in the last 10 or so years, and there's just little storytelling, very little rhyming, very little sort of social analysis, all these things that were absolutely common in 1990s and 2000s rap. I don't know what happened to hip hop, but it's a bad thing. I blame your generation, as most things.
Well, my generation only remembers Coolio as the guy with the funny hair that Weird Al made a parody of. And they don't really, and because like he's a West Coast guy, but he wasn't down with Death Row. Like he wasn't signed to Death Row, so his legacy doesn't really go on that much. But he's one of the all-time greats. And yeah, back then you had to be a storyteller. You had to be sharp. Otherwise, like there's too much competition out there.
That's
and
right.
yeah, musically, like there's a reason why Snoop Dogg fucked with him, why George Clinton loved him. Like he was one of the best.
Yeah. And it's funny, he's not even one of the, he's always been considered, not one of the more erudite or intellectual of the rappers, just like DMX, same thing. These guys are sort of considered knuckleheady a little bit types, but they're Shakespeare compared to rappers today. I'm sorry to say, it's just, they actually told stories, with a narrative arc that had meaning and that had like historical references in them. And I mean, really, and then tremendous sort of storytelling about what it was to live in Compton or South LA or the South Bronx. And you really got a sense of what it was like. And, NWA was the first people to tell us about policing, really, and like what the effect of having black cops was, which was nothing. The black cops were just as, what's the line? Basically, you say they're just as likely or more likely to beat you up than a white cop.
Up for the white cop. As Ice Cube,
and right, and then they'll front for the white cop, right? So yeah, I don't know. I despair over hip hop all the time because I've loved that genre until about 10 years ago, and I've loved every iteration since I've been listening since the late 1970s, and this is the first time where I just think it's not worth listening to. And of course, I don't think there's any absolute objective objectively good music. I think it's a silly idea. Just to my taste, it's nearly unlistenable. And I would like someone to give me an analysis of why hip hop is the way it is, so that almost every beat and almost every song sounds the same, that there's no sampling anymore. So there's no sort of musical layering or texturing in the songs, that there's no rhyming, there's no storytelling. Is there an explanation for this? Why this is the case now?
There's a confluence of factors. One of them is streaming services, in that people aren't trying to make albums anymore. They're trying to get their song onto a playlist. So we're kind of going back to the days of early radio, where you're trying to get in with the tastemakers and you're trying to make a quick song that can grab people's attention span, that can get played over and over again. And 30 seconds counts as a play on a streaming service. So it doesn't matter if your song is 31 seconds or 10 minutes. A play is a play.
Okay.
So longer 5-6 minute stories aren't earning people money.
Sorry. I missed that. Sorry. So short pieces.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. I lost the audio here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm good now.
Sweet. There's also I was gonna say Jack Mason.
I can't hear you.
You can't?
Sorry, my bad. I don't know why. Oh, let me go. I think I have to leave. Let me come and I'll be right back here.
I'll talk about music. I wanted to talk about culture anyway, so I'll just keep going.
There we go. I got you now.
Okay, sweet. Jack Mason, Perfume Nationalist, did an episode about nu metal recently, about the whole wave in the 90s. And then there's a documentary that just came out about Woodstock 99 that was really popular. And what's going on right now is like, because of Kanye with 808s and Heartbreaks, and because of Drake, shoot, your audio's playing me back a little bit. Okay, we're good. Because of it's hip hop is more melodic now, so it's more about the melody. It's not about the story being told. But the emotion of this time is not. It's not the Hotep stuff of the 90s. It's not the fun. Let's celebrate our culture. Let's party. And it's not the anger of the late 90s. It's a sad malaise, I think. It's even post emo. It's just everybody is just completely desensitized, not paying attention to anything. Like that's the era we're in. It's all very cynical.
Yeah. Would you say it's nihilistic?
It is very nihilistic. Bad Bunny is super popular because of that, and like a lot of the stuff that's just focused on good aesthetics, good visuals. Like that's a big thing nowadays. Is like nostalgic visuals, like the whole vaporwave thing, trying to retreat into the past, into the comfy, bright colors of early 2000s software images. That's a lot of it. Yeah. And then there's what Geo would call kitsch, where the political rappers aren't really making profound statements like they used to. They aren't really speaking from their experience. They're trying to be profound. They're trying to be political. And then there's the girl boss anthems. I wanted to talk about Lizzo too, because Lizzo's fun. Have you seen the thing about her and the flute, right, on Twitter that everybody's freaking out about?
Yeah.
She played James
yes,
Madison
indeed.
Yesterday, yeah. The 200-year-old flute, and all the right wingers on Twitter are just completely losing their mind over this. And they're like, "Oh, we're a conquered nation. She's desecrating our sacred symbols," when they didn't even know this flute existed yesterday. But really, what she's doing is she's talented. She can sing. She can play the flute well. She just doesn't do it during her concerts because people don't have the attention span to listen to it. And if you listen to her songs, she's bringing back disco. And even though it's girl boss anthems, they're groovy. They're played by real musicians. They're very, very fun. And they're just about having a good time and having fun. But because our society is way too hyper politicized, we aren't allowed to have fun with it. Like the libs have fun with it because it's girl boss anthems, and the conservatives hate it because she's a fat black woman in lingerie twerking. And nobody can just enjoy the music for music anymore.
Right. The politicization of art is a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. And it always is, always has been. Now, let me be clear. I believe that all art, all discourse is political, of course, but it is evaluating, it is judging art according to political standards. That's the problem, right? I enjoy this music because it has the right message in it, is the problem. And that's exactly where you start to get this convergence of the left and the right judging all art and music. They basically collaborate in doing this, in judging all art and music according to its politics. Mm-hmm. So that's why, that's when Matt Walsh is freaking out about Lizzo and calling it the end of American civilization or an attack on American civilization. He's right also, by the way. I mean, it is true. Wokeness, identity politics in America over the last 20 to 30 years has been explicitly an attempt to remove American history, American traditions. So I do think that was at least, on the subconscious mind of Lizzo and the people at the Library of Congress who organized this thing. Now, the thing is, do we care? Should we care that James Madison has been desecrated? Does Matt Walsh know anything about James Madison? Does anyone know anything about James Madison? I'm an American historian, and I could tell you a few things about him, but I'm not exactly an expert on James Madison. I know that the founding fathers are interesting, important historically. I like a lot of the things they did. I like much of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence, but in general, I see no reason to keep them around unless we think there's something useful and valuable in what they did forever. Are they eternally correct, the founding fathers? Are they eternally right about how we should govern our society? That just seems like absolutely silly to me, that old conservative, constructivist point of view. The idea that the Constitution is eternal and should be held sacred regardless of how society changes, and has changed since it was written. So I'm kind of on neither side here. I think that it's good to be, I also think it's good to be irreverent toward certainly government officials of the past, which is what James Madison is first and foremost. This is a person who thought he should be one of the leaders of people. He should be one of the managers of people. And he basically took it upon himself to become that. And then he did that. He governed over people, often against their will, against their consent. Some people voted for him. Most people did not vote for James Madison. The vast majority of people never voted for James Madison, of course, who he governed. So exactly what legitimacy does he have in the founding fathers in general? And I'm not talking just about the slaves who didn't vote. I'm talking about most Americans, most people in the former colonies didn't vote for this guy. So why exactly should we be holding him and the other founding fathers as sacred? I like that. I just don't like what he's being replaced with. I love what you're saying about Lizzo's music. I don't really listen to it. If it's true that it is party music, I'm all for that. We need more party music, like the hip hop of the 1980s. Hip hop became serious and dark and violent after the 1980s. Before then, it was just about having a good time. So I like that about her. But every time I hear her talk about politics, which is often, it's intolerable. There's all sorts of moralism. She's replacing one moralism, the old American moralism, with a new, equally harsh or maybe even harsher moralism.
Well, here's the thing about her. It's fun to sit on your ass and eat DoorDash all day. And that's what she represents to me. And can we stop lying that it's not fun to do that? Can we stop pretending that we're above that? Our millennials are kind of pathetic, but at least she's honest about it and she's having fun with it. And why can't we have fun with it?
So Coolio lived in a gangster's paradise. Lizzo lives in a neoliberal paradise.
She does, yeah.
You get stuff delivered to your door.
Yeah.
And you got to watch your weight when that happens.
Mm-hmm. We need somebody to write that out there, right? Neoliberal paradise out there.
Right. Living in a neoliberal paradise. Was she raised by the state? I doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt is she raised poor?
I don't know. I don't know about her background. like that.
I doubt it. If she's a
I doubt
classically
it
trained
too.
flautist, I doubt it.
She's a classically trained flautist. Those
Yeah.
don't grow on trees.
And they tend not to grow in public housing projects
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
They could, but they tend not to.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, where was I going with this? But about the founding fathers.
Yeah.
I think we should have reverence to the spirit of the revolution, and that's where our roots are from. Yes, there were government officials, and yes, there were elites, and we need to definitely keep that in mind. Okay, here's where I was going with this. One screen, two movies. This is like the story of every news story ever.
Yeah.
Is 50% of the country sees Lizzo playing the flute from the Library of Congress and say, wow, a talented, accomplished musician was granted a beautiful heirloom from the founding of our country. Isn't this a great moment for American culture? And then the other half of the country sees, oh my goodness, an ugly, fat, black twerking woman is playing a flute of our most distinguished founding father, and she's desecrating and she's conquering us with our culture. And the truth itself doesn't matter. Postmodernist, is it even out there? But like, this is every single news story is just evidence to further entrench people into their own culture war areas, and it's tiresome.
Well, for half of Americans, fat is good, and black is virtuous. Saintly. You're a saint if you're a black person. You can do no wrong. You can only do good if you're black. I mean, I'm not really exaggerating. This is the way that basically all white liberals think. So when they see a fat black woman doing something, they know that it's the right thing to do. There's no chance that they would ever criticize Lizzo, because also she talks the talk. She's also on their side politically. If Lizzo were a Republican, no, they'd throw under the bus. But because she is on the team and she's saying the correct things, when they see that video, they don't have to know what the content is. They know that this person, this fat black person, must be good and right. And so conversely, the other side, when Christian conservative Republican types like Matt Walsh, etc., see that video, they see desecration of these sacred things that they know nothing about, but they've heard about. They've heard about James Madison. They think he might have been a founding father, probably important in American history. And they've just been trained to think that that's good and virtuous too, often, usually knowing little to nothing about those American traditions that they are upholding. That's what's so annoying to me. There are serious paleo-conservatives. There are serious neo-reactionaries of some sort, serious traditionalists who do know the history, they do know the traditions, and they can make an argument for why we should revere James Madison, although not the neo-reactionary so much.
Yeah, James Madison's the architect of everything in the Constitution that those people don't like. He's the guy who centralized power. He's the guy. Yeah,
exactly. Him and Hamilton are the bad guys. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it's all I want. I just want some intelligent, educated conversation about this stuff before we just reflexively, without even understanding what the content is, taking sides and either trashing or celebrating a thing. I just want more intelligent conversation.
Totally. And this is where it comes with our culture as well. Why the music sucks nowadays, and why you've talked about this all the time. This generation of youth are not rebellious. It's insane. But our culture is in a really, really shitty place. Part of it is because it's so divided, and like it's defined by hatred of the stupid culture war of the opposing side of whatever you are in the culture war. But there's a complete lack of seriousness, and yet like a sense of despair all the time. Like for people my age, there's this feeling that we'll never own a home, that the world is going to end by climate change, yada yada yada. But there isn't any serious counter to that. Like there's no hope, and there's no rage, and there's no rebelliousness to it. It's just resigned. It's pessimism. It's a lot like the Afro-pessimism you described in modern Ta-Nehisi Coates writing and all that. But it's a cultural movement of pessimism and self-defeat.
Mm-hmm. When I was born in 1965, America was at its height. This was the height of the post-war economic boom. You had more people going to college than ever before. America reigned supreme across the world. It was winning the Cold War with the Soviet Union in conflict after conflict. Not yet, Vietnam had not yet happened, by the way. America had not yet lost the Vietnam War. It had just started to lose the war. But we thought we were winning the war when I was born. Well, when you were born, Vietnam had happened. The United States had lost a war. And economically, since 1973, since the oil crisis of 1973, as the left will always tell us, real wages have either been stagnant or have declined. And so you have been living, and your generation has lived, you've lived your entire lives in an empire in decline. And many of us are now thinking that it is in terminal decline, that it is about to be over. And which might bring us to, foreign policy news these days. But this is, so it makes sense to me that hip hop has no music in it, that hip hop has no joy in it, that it has no storytelling, that it is nihilistic, that it is fundamentally depressed, that the drug of choice of rappers today is Xanax, right? When I was coming up, the drug of choice for rappers was cocaine. I want to bring us back to that. When you when you felt super alive and super invigorated and super energetic and you wanted to do things and say things. For all the problems of that, I prefer it to the current culture of depressants. And so I do think it is, we can explain your generation's psychology through politics and history. Mm-hmm. I do think that America is a fundamentally different place in the last 20 years than it was when I was growing up. And it makes sense to me that people of your age in this country would have very little optimism. And so why get excited about anything? Why tell stories? Why make music that makes you dance? Let's just get through this. Let's just survive it.
Mm-hmm. You know what? As you were saying that, part of that depression too is we're not allowed to celebrate victories. Also, like if you believe that gay marriage was a good thing, and even if it's good or bad, it's certainly historic. It's certainly an accomplishment. It's certainly something that nobody ever saw coming. If you believe that's a good thing, and it's something like that's a civilizational changing moment in history, and it was immediately washed over and immediately replaced with a new crisis that we all have to organize for, with transgenderism. So there's no celebrating our victories. There's no joy if you consider that victory. Yeah.
It's interesting. I like that you brought up gay marriage because I've been rethinking this issue. Mm-hmm. So I opposed gay marriage, or I should say I did not support it. I didn't oppose it. And I made that clear. I would never get in the way of anyone choosing to get married. I would never try to stop that by any means. But I didn't support it because I am a critic of the institution of marriage, and I'm a critic of the institution of the nuclear family. I've many times said that I favor the extended family model. I'm not anti-family. I just want a very different form of it. I think it's better for the kids. I think it's better for the parents. I think it's better for society in general to have multiple people raise children, not just the two people, or often and increasingly just the one person sitting on an island all alone in their house, making money to support the family and raising the kids, being a good mother, a good father, all simultaneously. I can speak to this with a great experience. It is basically an impossible task. And it makes for what we see in American families. We see tremendous alcoholism. We see domestic violence. We see divorce. We see breakups increasingly. That's not because I think of the sexual revolution or women's freedom or gay rights. I think it's because the nuclear family is essentially impossible to sustain without drinking a lot and cheating on your spouse. I mean, you just can't be, it's very difficult to live with someone from the age of your 20s until you die, the same person, and then to raise children again, just the two of you, it's nearly impossible. And this is why you see so many couples and couples counseling. Those are the ones who are successful. They're in couples counseling too. I want to see statistics on the number of nuclear families in which there is no alcoholism, no domestic violence, and no need for couples counseling.
Mhm.
What percentage is that of American nuclear families? How many are free of those massive problems? I bet it's a very small number.
Yeah. Well, I'd say I have a different perspective from you on that, in that I think our culture is very naive about, or has been very naive about marriage, in that other cultures don't see marriage as a thing for love. They see it as purely a business decision. Like, this
Right.
family's wealthy, that family's wealthy, let's get together. This is the
Right.
best thing for everybody involved. It's
Interesting.
love is something that teenagers deal with. It's stupid, it's irrational, don't worry about it.
It's
And I think,
interesting.
yeah. And then, my political opinion on marriage, I think it's a religious covenant. I think it's a religious institution. I think the state has no part in it. I was just using that as a historical example. But yeah, I think that's what you're talking about, is a naivete in American culture about what marriage should be that leads them to fail.
That's brilliant. I think that might be the heart of it, actually. Right. We expect to find, and we're taught this, we're trained to think this. We are trained to think that marriage is where the real love happens. And that's what happens when you get married. It represents the fact that you're in love, and it is the culmination, the fulfillment of love, this deep romantic and sexual love you have with this person, which is, of course, impossible to sustain over decades and decades of monogamy. Christopher Ryan, who's written Sex at Dawn, has argued that it is not in our DNA. It is biologically counter to us that that animals who are similar to us, like the bonobos and the chimps, are not monogamous. And so that if we maintain monogamous relationships, we are doing it against our nature. Now, I'm not an essentialist in any way, but his argument is that, but there is an assumption in America that it is natural, that lifelong monogamy is natural, that if you just follow nature's course, that's where you'll end up. No, you have to force yourself into that box, and you got to maintain it, and you've got to regulate and police it. And that's why we have so many couples counselors. I mean this, it's a giant industry because it's such a difficult project to sustain.
Yeah. And then what I wanted to say about the culture is the lack of seriousness. So we are, and this will tie into foreign policy, we are as close to nuclear war as we've ever been in my lifetime, possibly since the Cuban Missile Crisis, possibly even more than the Cuban Missile Crisis. We are as close as possible to man-made global catastrophe. And institutions like the Doomsday Clock, for example, they haven't moved their ticker in the last 3 years. Like, we're kind of being told that everything's going to be all right, kind of. Like, we're kind of being lulled to sleep. Like, we're not put on edge like we were during the Trump administration. Like, constantly during the Trump administration, there was, oh, we're going to nuclear war with North Korea. Oh, we're going to nuclear war over this and that. Or like Hawaii was threatened with nukes, and everybody got an alert on their phones, and the doomsday clock was moved like 3 or 4 times. And yet, like, we're not taking the threat of nuclear war seriously at all as a culture.
Yeah, wasn't I just complaining about this, how the anti-nuke movement died in the 1980s or 1990s and hasn't reemerged since then? The nukes have remained. The movement against them disappeared. Are we closer to nuclear war than ever before? Certainly could be. I don't know if we've ever not been close to it. I think we're just lucky to avoid particular kinds of conflict that would lead to nuclear war. I mean, and I really mean just lucky. We've only had nuclear war weapons for about 70 years, 60, 70 years. And so 70 plus years, sorry. So that's not a long time. That's not a long time. It seems to me virtually inevitable that at some point, some leader will get elected or appointed in some country who will push the button against some enemy. Or there will be some accident that happens in a war. Some Chinese ship will run into an American ship in the Pacific Ocean. Or who knows what could happen in Ukraine that could cause a nuclear war, because you have people certainly on the Ukrainian and NATO side who seem to be fanatical about this war, about prosecuting this war. And they're the ones who've been talking about using nuclear weapons since February against Russia. I mean, it's amazing. You've had many public officials, many State Department and NATO officials mention the possibility of tactical nuclear war in Ukraine. And Putin didn't mention it until that speech last week. And he only said, if you use those, we'll use them against you. That's all he said. It was in reaction to those threats. So I don't know if we're now closer to nuclear war, although the war in Ukraine makes us closer to all sorts of terrible things. And nuclear war is one of them, I guess. But we can't predict it. I mean, are we going to talk about Nord Stream now? Because to me, that is the ultimate provocative move by the United States. I really cannot believe that this happened.
Nord Stream pipeline 2 was something exploded. Pretty much everybody thinks it's the CIA or somebody or the United States. The United States, Biden and Victoria Nuland in January were both saying if Putin invades Ukraine, that the Nord Stream pipeline is going to end. And lo and behold, it just blew up in the middle of the Baltic Sea a couple days ago. Right.
So the Nord Stream pipeline, which is really two pipelines, 1 and 2, they're together, was begun. That project of building that pipeline was begun in 1997. And so this is, of course, after the fall of the Soviet Union. This is during the rise of Putin. Putin becomes head of Russia a few years later. And this is when the Clintons and their people in NATO are want to make sure that Russia is removed as a player, as an obstacle to their ambitions. They wanted to move NATO.
We lost you, Thad. Real quick, while we're getting Thad back, I'm going to play a couple clips. This is Biden back in January talking about the Nord Stream pipeline, and a reporter challenging him, wait a minute, what do you mean you're going to get rid of it? Isn't it Germany's?
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
And this isn't like typically where Biden has said some questionable things. This was also confirmed by Victoria Nuland. Same week, she said the exact same thing, only she wasn't challenged by a reporter.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
I'm back.
Sweet. I just played Biden back in January. Yeah.
I saw it. I was in the middle of just talking about the history of Nord Stream, which goes back to 1997. The story is simple. The United States, in every administration from Clinton through Trump and Biden, has opposed the existence of that pipeline because they did not want Russia to have that power to sell its oil or gas to other countries. And in this case, it was to Western Europe. And what happened was Germany, for many reasons, agreed to buy gas from Russia and built their industry. Many of their industries became dependent on Russian gas because of that. And so then Germany fell under the sway of the Green Party and environmentalism and began a real process of deindustrialization. I mean, they really do not want fossil fuels in their country. And that's what they've gotten. Now, the United States has made that a permanent feature of German life. They will not be able to have any fossil fuels running anything from now on. This is an incredible action. If it is by the United States and every piece of evidence points to the United States, and there's even more evidence that it was the United States who did this. This was intentional. This was sabotaging the civilian infrastructure of one of America's chief allies. Germany has the biggest economy in Europe, or it did, it won't for very long. Germany has been the staunchest, most loyal, you could say even fanatical ally of the United States. Every German politician since 1945 has been the most pro-American patriot you'll ever meet. Sabotaging the civilian infrastructure, and such an important part of the civilian infrastructure as a pipeline delivering energy to, I mean, this is what, so we already knew that Germany was facing a very bleak winter because of the sanctions, because they were refusing to take Russian gas. And now when the German people, here's the thing, Michael, when the German people rise up this winter because they don't have gas to heat their homes, and they're in poverty because inflation's through the roof, and they demand, there are riots in the streets, and they demand from the government that the government start taking that gas from Russia, the government of Germany will not be able to. The United States of America, by doing this, locked the German people into poverty, into misery, simply to, they think, enact regime change in Russia, that this will lead to the overthrow of Putin and his government somehow, which is all a fantasy. But to deliberately sabotage the economic civilian infrastructure of your chief ally in Europe, and to ensure that the people in that country will be miserable, will literally not be able to heat their homes, and that they have no means of getting out of that. That's what the United States just did. This is how fanatical they are about Putin and Russia. They will stop at almost nothing. So yes, you're right. In a sense, if they can bomb a pipeline for civilian purposes, then why wouldn't they want to drop a nuclear bomb on civilians?
The official story is that this is essentially an accident, like maybe just a random explosion. But like, even like we're in the investigation phase right now. Has there been any like beating of the drums of like, we're gonna find out whoever did this? You know, like there hasn't really been any condemnation of these explosions. I haven't seen any condolences said to the German people that they're gonna go through an essentially catastrophic winter because of this. Like, it just doesn't make any sense other than we did this and we like it.
I believe that Tony Blinken, and I think NATO, I'm pretty sure Blinken said this, they will have an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
There will be an investigation conducted by NATO.
Yeah.
In the United States. Well, here's the thing, NATO, you control that water. NATO controls that water. Yes, there are Russian military installations nearby, but everyone knows, and everyone has said, that NATO forces control that water where the explosion happened. So investigate yourself. We also know that there was a Navy SEAL team right near there, and that's exactly who would have done this. They are experts in underwater demolition. That's what they do. It's one of the things they do. And also we know that the United States has submarine superiority. The United States is dominant underwater. Our submarine warfare fighting ability is second to none, apparently, according to everyone. And so the United States is the country that could have done this. And also they had every reason to do it. If you're a fanatical imperialist, like the leaders of the American government, people in our world who do foreign policy are saying that the Biden administration is the most dangerous administration since World War II. That they are that reckless and that fanatical and that belligerent, and that they will stop at almost nothing to take down Putin. It is scary. And I think that is why you might be right that we might be closer to World War III and a nuclear war than ever before.
And for the environmentalists, isn't this essentially, we have an oil spill on our hands right now, right? Like
well, I don't know. I mean, I think it had been mostly turned off, so there was very limited flow. There was some flow. There was definitely something spilling into the Baltic Sea right now. Yeah, it's not good for the environment. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, And yeah, there's so much unrest in Europe right now, and it's only September. It's going to get really cold really fast.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
January, February in Germany is going to be interesting, to say the least.
So there's that Vladimir Lenin quote: "There are years where weeks happen, and there are weeks where years happen." And this is one of those weeks. What's going on in Iran? I remember last week, as we were about to start the show, I was just looking at Iran. I'm like, there are cops' cars on fire and massive uprisings. Iran's never been stable, but this seems weird. I don't know what's going on. What's been going on there?
Yeah. One thing about the pipeline, though, I wanted to get this in before we move on. In 1982, the CIA came up with a plan to bomb a pipeline in Siberia, a Soviet pipeline in Siberia, and Reagan gave the go-ahead, and they did, in fact, bomb that pipeline in Siberia. So they've done this before. Iran. Okay, well.
Can I say one thing about the CIA before we move on?
Sure.
People always call people like us conspiracy theorists for bringing up facts that the CIA have done. If this is what they've done in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and nobody suffered any consequences for it, and the same people are in power today, what do you think is going to happen without our knowledge right now? Like,
oh yeah,
yeah.
If you know the history of the CIA, you will at least listen to just about any conspiracy theory now. You need to take most conspiracy theories seriously if you know the history of the CIA, because the history of the CIA did some of the wildest stuff imaginable. So yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the CIA and Iran, yes, the CIA has been in Iran forever and has been very, very active in Iran forever. They, of course, created the government of the Shah in the 1950s by overthrowing Mossadegh in a coup that was organized by the CIA. And then they suffered in 1979 the blowback of the Islamic Revolution, when the CIA, much of the CIA was kicked out of Iran. And by the way, many of those hostages who were taken in 1979, of course, worked for the CIA, and that's exactly why they were taken hostages.
And why they were released as soon as Ronald Reagan got in, the second Ronald Reagan got in, yeah.
Right, it was good timing for his election. So they've been trying to remove the Iranian regime since 1979. Again, this is across administrations. It's Democrats and Republicans. Trump was more belligerent toward Iran than most administrations, but they've all been belligerent. And there have been crushing sanctions on Iran for decades. Every administration has renewed them or added new sanctions. And because of that, we don't know exactly, but we do know for sure that many, many, many thousands and thousands of Iranians have not been able to get the medicine or the medical treatments or the medical equipment that they need. Food has been cut off. Various kinds of equipment that are essential for life have been cut off. It has been an active war against Iran for decades, and children are dying of diseases that are curable because they can't get medicine because of Iran has been banned from the international SWIFT banking system. That's why they can't make payments for medicine. It's very complicated, but the meaning of it is that they cannot get medicine and they cannot get certain food. So people with HIV, people with cancer are dying at much higher rates in Iran than the rest of the world because of these sanctions. There are multiple diseases that are going untreated in Iran because of these sanctions. And so these protests that are happening now, and last time we saw protests like this were in 2019, also occurred during an economic crisis. Iran has multiple crises going on, but one of them is an economic crisis that is mostly produced by these sanctions placed on it by the United States and the West. So that's one reason that people are in the streets fighting the morality police. But we see so many videos of sizable, not necessarily massive demonstrations, but sizable, like people in the hundreds or thousands on the street fighting the cops in the street. And at least I know one morality cop has been killed and several others have been put in the hospital. This is very serious stuff going on. And I've just seen too many of those videos to think that it's all a product of the CIA.
No, there's dozens of deaths. And yeah.
Okay. Dozens of police deaths?
No, protester deaths.
Oh, yes.
Total
Right,
deaths.
right, right. Sure.
Mostly
Right.
protesters, but certainly police in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just seen too much of it. Now, the other thing is we know that for decades now, and especially in the last 10 years, the expansion of secular Western styles and cultures within Iran has taken off. That there's tattoo parlors and you can get your nose, your piercings wherever you want. There's, piercing parlors, what are they called? Blue jeans are huge. Rock and, all the Western music is gigantic. There's a humongous Iranian hip hop scene that I've been aware of for a long time. There's a huge Iranian heavy metal scene. My friend Mark Levine has written books about this, about the heavy metal scene in Iran. There's massive Western influence. There's a huge amount of attraction to Western popular culture in Iran. This is all, of course, completely contrary to Sharia and to Islamic rule, and the regime has hated this from the get-go. This is why Iranian mullahs are almost daily issuing fatwas against Western popular culture, against pop stars, against navel rings, etc., all that stuff. They hate it because they understand that once people are more attracted to that stuff than the Quran or what the mullahs have to say, they have no basis for legitimacy. That people would much rather enjoy themselves, watch music videos, and dance, etc., than pray at the mosque. Now, many Iranians manage to do both at once, but you're simply not following Sharia law, the basis of Islamic rule, if you're watching Kim Kardashian on TV. If you dress that way, if you don't want to wear your hijab. So this has been going on for a long time. So I don't think this has all been created by the CIA. I do think the CIA is contributing to it. It must be contributing to it in many ways. And the way it's being reported, of course, in the West is the way that the CIA wants it to be reported. But I have to think it's legitimate and organic. Now, here's a huge thing, though. Why is this happening now? I mean, there's been an economic crisis for decades, as I said, brought on by the sanctions. It's gotten a little worse lately, but the Iranian economy has been terrible many times over the last couple of decades. So last week in Odessa, in Ukraine, there was a kamikaze drone that flew into a Ukrainian army command center in Odessa and blew it up and presumably killed a bunch of Ukrainian commanders. This was a major moment in the war that hasn't been reported much, because it was a clear Russian success. Now, where did Russia get that kamikaze drone? It was produced in Iran. So Iran has been developing a very close relationship with both Russia and China. Iran also recently joined the Shanghai SCO, the Shanghai organization. Basically, it's China, Russia, and Iran have joined that together as a military alliance. Iran has also just recently applied for membership in the BRICS group: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This anti-West, anti-US new alliance that's forming, that's all just happened with Iran. Iran just helped Russia take out the Ukrainian command with its kamikaze drone. It is now joining the alliance with Russia and China against the West. This could very well be a reason why the CIA would want to escalate tensions on the ground in Iran right now. So they may have been paying people. They may have been paying agents provocateurs to stage these protests, to fight the cops. So who knows? Some of it, certainly, it's all serving the interests of the United States and NATO right now, what's going on in Iran. Some of it must have been provoked by the CIA, undoubtedly. But I do think most of it is real and organic and a real representation of what many, many Iranians want and think.
Yeah, just about every Iranian American has been ecstatic. The scared joy that you see when you hope that things might actually change, like that. I've seen that from just about every Iranian American over the last week. About the nuclear deal that is currently being renegotiated, the Obama administration 2015 nuclear deal to lift the sanctions in Iran if we have complete oversight over their nuclear capabilities and they guarantee that they never build a nuclear weapon. Biden's renegotiating that right now as we speak, or the administration is, after, Trump. Just like a deal can be created with executive order, it can be destroyed by executive order. So Trump got rid of that. Do you see what do you think of the Iran deal? Do you see any hope for it with everything going down right now? What's the future for Iranian politics in general?
So I have to say, I mean, I don't know what's really gone on with Iran's nuclear program. I know that all of the people I know on the anti-war left and the libertarian side have all said Iran has always been compliant, that they've never been building a bomb. All the nuclear program has only been for civilian purposes. And then everybody on the other side has said, oh no, they've been building a bomb. And that's why Israel has been assassinating their scientists, their nuclear scientists. And I mean, these incredible on the street assassinations of these scientists in Iran that have been going on for years, undoubtedly carried out by Israeli Secret Service. I mean, Israel's not stupid. I don't like Israel. I don't like, the project of Zionism, but they're not stupid. So I don't think they would go that far out of, not to mention they've bombed Iranian nuclear facilities more than once. I got to think there was something going on in Iran, some attempt to build some kind of weapon there with their nuclear program, if Israel's going to do that. But who knows? I mean, I've never been on the ground there, so I don't know.
A lot of the anti-war people say that the Iran deal was the only good thing to come out of Obama's foreign policy. Do you agree with that?
I suppose. I mean, but again, like, it stopped being enforced pretty much right away. It became a null deal almost immediately, as it would have. I mean, to me, what matters is politics. What's going on in Iran generally, what's going on in the United States generally. That's what determines whether we're going to be safe or not, whether or not a nuclear bomb is going to be dropped. A particular deal, a particular law is only so good as the politics of the time will support it. I mean, the politics of Iran and the United States have to make this deal real and enforceable. There has to be a culture upholding any law. And if we don't have a culture in either country that upholds that deal, then it may as well be, it is moot. And so I never thought much of it. I want instead to build a world in which Iran and the United States are not locked in mortal confrontation, in which they are not, in which neither country thinks that the other is a mortal threat. Same with Israel. I would like to see the Islamic Republic dissolve, and I think it is dissolving. The best thing, if you want regime change in Iran as an American, the best thing to do is nothing. Leave it alone. It is falling apart on its own. The people, as I said, are far more interested in other stuff than in following Sharia law. Let the people of Iran decide where they want to go. And thankfully for us, it seems as if many, if not most of them, are going in our direction. So just let them do that. That regime, that government will fall. It's just a matter of time. And in fact, when you impose sanctions, you make the United States the enemy, and you give the regime a tool to say, they can say, oh, look at the United States. See, they want to starve us. They want to make it so that we can't treat our cancer victims, our cancer patients. They're starving children. They're denying medicine to children, which is all true. And so the United States does become the great Satan. And the regime does have some credibility with Iranian people because of that. So lift the sanctions and continue to send music videos and TV shows and movies and blue jeans and piercings and tattoo designs into Iran. And that is guaranteed to get us what we want as Americans there.
Same deal with Cuba, same deal with Venezuela.
Yep.
And then with the Nord Stream pipeline, when stuff like that happens, and given the whatever percent chance that it was an accident or it wasn't the CIA, and the United States doesn't completely condemn it, completely go into emergency mode to help the civilians of Germany about this, and doesn't send their condolences to the civilians of Germany, with allies, like, why would you ever be an ally with the United States after something that, after the Nord Stream pipeline?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to know how that phone call went between Biden and Olaf Scholz when Biden told him, we're going to bomb that pipeline so you can never get gas again. And your people are going to be really cold this winter and there's no way you can get out of it. So as I said, German politics has been two things over the last 30 or so years. It's been totally pro-American and totally green. So maybe, they said, okay, fine, we're deindustrializing anyway. We don't need gas and oil. Fine.
Mhm.
It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine the German government or the American government doing this anyway, because again, yeah, as you're saying, like the next time the United States wants to develop an ally with another country, I mean, why would you do that? I mean, if we're capable of bombing the pipelines of our allies, of our closest allies, why would you ever want to join with us?
Mhm. Same goes with Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Mubarak. These were all at one point in time strong allies of the United States and completely deposed of. Yeah.
Yeah, this administration, the foreign policy establishment right now, they're both fanatical and they're very dumb. There's no great thinkers. As I said before, there's no Henry Kissinger these days.
Mhm.
Henry Kissinger, as I said, was a mass murderer, but he had some ideas, he had some thoughts, he could think, he could analyze things. These guys, Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Susan Rice, Victoria Nuland, they are ideologues, number one, and they're just not very talented. They're not good at persuading people. They're
They
not
don't
good
have
at
to
making any
persuade
sort of.
people. That's the thing. They don't have
That's
to.
it. That's right. That's exactly right. Because they control the media. They control the narrative. They control all the spin. And so Americans have no idea what's going on because the media in this country, I mean, the psyop going on around foreign policy recently, around Ukraine, has just been very impressive. How complete it is. Even Fox News is on the same page. They're taking orders also from the State Department. It is really amazing what Americans have been led to believe by the American media at the direction of the U.S. government.
Yeah, well, Fox News and CNN, whenever there's a war, they step in line, they bring on generals, they bring on intelligence agents, and uncritically use them as experts and just completely verbatim repeat their talking points, have them speak in their own words. In the 60s and 70s, there was conspiracy theories about the CIA infiltrating the media and trying to get their spin out there, but now they just put them on as guests and as experts directly.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And these ex-CIA guys tend to be the biggest. They end up being the biggest heroes, like Michael Hayden, that absolute freak. I mean, that guy's been a fanatic since day one. They love him. They can't get enough. MSNBC can't get enough of Michael Hayden. And if you work for the CIA, you're okay with MSNBC. You're okay with the liberals these days.
And there's the whole panic about disinformation, the whole panic about wrong information spreading and leading to dangerous actual consequences. A big, big, big chunk of our current geopolitical situation is due to the American people being bombarded with 3 years of Russiagate conspiracy theories that were completely unsubstantiated. Fantasies about there being a P tape and that Trump is being blackmailed and is in the hands of Putin. Just completely intelligence fabricated lies, completely false, complete misinformation that led to an attitude that Russia is our biggest enemy, that they have direct influence over everywhere in the world, and that they need to be stopped. And that attitude is what keeps anybody from thinking critically, I think, from what's going on right now.
We have still not had a reckoning about Russiagate.
Yep.
There are still many, many people who still believe Russia has been controlling American politics since 2016. Mm-hmm. That they determined the outcome of the election in 2016. That Trump and Putin colluded to push the election in his favor in 2016. They still are not admitting that they were wrong for 3 years, even with the Mueller report. But that reckoning is coming because the Republicans are going to at least take the House and they might still take the Senate. I saw that Robert Barnes and Richard Barris are still predicting that the Republicans will take both houses of Congress in November. But if they take just one, if they take just the House, there will be investigations beginning immediately in January of all these things. Russiagate, the election of 2016, the election of 2020, Wuhan, the pandemic, the lockdowns, all of it. And it's going to be big. I've been saying this for a while, but I think it's going to be big. The only question is, what will the liberal regime, the Democratic Party, do in response to it? Because they won't be able to stop those House Republicans with subpoena power from bringing all their officials up before the Congress and forcing them to testify under oath, right? Fauci is going to be up there in Congress testifying. All the people who ran the Russiagate project, the Russiagate operation, will be forced to testify on national TV before Congress. And if they lie, they go to prison. So that's coming. That's coming in just a few months. And I can't wait. So when that happens, that might signal a shift, or it might bring a shift in American politics. Once most Americans no longer are disabused of this idea about Putin controlling the elections in 2016, I think a lot changes. A lot changes. I'm not exactly sure what, but this is going to be a moment. This is going to be a moment in January.
Yeah. Again, I don't see that reckoning happening culturally necessarily. I do see the Democrats losing big the next election cycle, but like the coastal elites are still going to think what they think. Again, every news story is just deeper entrenching people into their already held beliefs. They don't see the other side. They just don't see it. And even if they see it, it gets processed in a way to confirm their biases, whatever side that is. And
here's the question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, with the reckoning that's supposedly coming, the thing that scares me is that these deep state people are unelected bureaucrats who actually wield a lot of power. And what are they going to try to do in response to it? I mean, they're already trying to arrest everybody that's ever been shaken hands with Trump, but they've got more strings that they can pull in the federal government to stop this reckoning.
Here's the question. What will it take for most American liberals to think that conservatives and Republicans or anti-liberals are not racist? That's what it comes down to.
We were talking about this last night during the Baldwin class. That's a complete refutation of their entire identity. Their entire identity is built off of being the cool person and being in opposition to the stupid redneck, the evil Nazi, whoever. That's their entire identity, is being the cool anti-racist.
If they don't have the racism card to play, they don't have anything to play. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything is built on that. Everything is built on their accusations of racism. What would they have against Trump if he just clearly wasn't racist? That's what it was all about, right? From the beginning. Trump is racist. That's why he's evil.
That's the only thing. That's literally the only thing.
Right.
And they get angry at you. They get angry at you if you ask them to say something more than that, because you're a bad person for not immediately seeing it.
Right. So I've got to think it is when MAGA shows up with a whole bunch of black people in it, which they are doing. I mean, apparently the black membership of MAGA is growing every day, and we have numbers to support that. The Hispanic membership of MAGA is definitely growing every day. I think it's up to 25% now. 25% of Hispanics are voting for Republicans now. I think that's right. Maybe it's more. I think it's more, actually. Mm-hmm. But I think it's about 25% of black men now are voting Republican. And that's just growing and growing, and it's going to continue to grow because the Republican Party has basically nothing to offer except the same old.
The
Democratic Party, has nothing to offer except little dribs and drabs of the welfare state, which isn't even that generous. So why support it? Why bother with it? Keeps you as a ward of the state forever, as Coolio said. But yeah, I think that maybe when MAGA is clearly a multiracial, multicultural movement, maybe then the liberal rank and file will say, okay, maybe they're not racist. Mm-hmm. I don't know. When they do, then where do we go? Then American politics is a whole new ballgame. I have no idea. Once the racism card is taken out of the game, where will liberals go? How will they gain a following? How will they ever substantiate their arguments? They always substantiate their arguments with the accusation of racism. They have no argument without that.
Mhm.
Every argument that's been made against me by a leftist has always had some like racist accusation inside of it, right? Oh, you had someone on your program, you on your show 3 years ago who once met someone who used the N-word. Therefore, you're bad and we don't have to listen to you. We all know that's how they do it. So they don't have that card to play anymore. When the Republicans are the Black Party and the Hispanic Party, which they could become, then what? Then where does progressivism go? Because they can't be talking about social engineering and turning people on. They can't be talking about going to war halfway across the world to save this or that group of people, because no one wants that. That's what progressives have been about for 100 years. Imperialism and social engineering. But those are so unpalatable to most people when they know what they are, that they've had to dress them up with this anti-racism stuff. It's anti-racist to support the war in Ukraine. It's anti-racist to support this or that government program that rearranges society in various ways. It's always anti-racist. So if they don't have that anymore, what will they have to promote progressivism? And I don't see it. I think that progressivism might be in its last days, meaning last years. I mean, it's not going to be overnight, but I think this coming election will be the beginning of the end for progressivism.
Yeah, we were talking about culture and complete lack of meaning. I do see the youth invested in climate change, though. I do see that being environmentalism and climate change being something compelling for a lot of people. I think that's going to fall apart when the shit hits the fan and people need energy like
how many people under 30 really are really worried about climate change?
Man, I'm in a college town, so
yeah,
I might be just super biased by my sample size. But I just see a lot of people going vegetarian for the planet. I see a lot of people carrying around their metal straws everywhere. Yeah. And most Americans are well off already to where they can care about it, you know?
Yeah, but not all America is Bloomington or Berkeley.
Yeah.
So well, we know this from polls, right? I mean, climate change is always last in the list of issues that Americans care about. I mean, last, like dead last. Americans really don't care, except in places like where you and I live. Thank God.
Yeah.
I mean, the more and more I think about climate change, the more and more I read about it and all the news that comes in about it. I'm sorry. It's not a hoax, but it's one of the greatest, again, psyops in American history. It is so vastly overplayed and for obvious reasons of social control and social engineering. Naomi Klein admitted it about 5 years ago when she said, I was a socialist and I didn't really care about the environment until I realized that we can use environmentalism, climate change, to scare people into adopting socialism. She said that. And I said, that's what I suspected, Naomi. Thanks for confirming that. And that's really what it is. Now, the thing is, they've convinced themselves of it. And worse still, they've convinced their poor children that they're going to drown or die in a fire because of climate change in their lifetime. I mean, this adds to the nihilism of hip hop, probably. You know, what is there to live for if we're all gonna drown because of climate change?
Yeah. Well, it does dominate the politics of Europe, and like I do see giant youth marches, and it seems to be like one of the few things that actually gets people out, or like it's a vision of the world that gives people purpose, in a sense. And a big thing is like I'm not gonna have kids because I care about the planet so much. I'm not gonna go. You know, like there's kind of a withdrawing from adulthood. Like starting a family is a big stage of adulthood, and there's kind of a perpetual I'm going to live in the pod and just consume and be meager and not have too many ambitions because I'm a virtuous and I care about the planet, when really I'm just justifying my own laziness and I want to give up. I see that a lot.
Yeah. Well, we will see just how environmentalist Europeans are in January. I think the green movement in Europe is maybe on its last legs too. You're seeing increasing rebellion against the environmentalist programs across Europe, not just in Northern Europe where it's so strong. I mean, but everywhere, all across Europe. And there's going to be massive protests against what the Greens have done to those poor people. They refuse to bring nuclear power plants online with this coming. They knew that they didn't have enough gas and oil for the winter, and they still refused to bring 2 nuclear power plants online, which even like the founder of the Sierra Club is now promoting and supporting nuclear power. Even many environmentalists are supporting nuclear power, not just Michael Shullenberger out here. He's this environmentalist who's big nuclear power proponent.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are gonna, boy, when you're shivering in your house in Berlin in January and February, that green program is going to look less and less appealing to you.
Yeah.
So I don't see it lasting.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of George Orwell's The Road to Wigan Pier, where he talks about all those coal miners. And I think it's the end of the first half of the book where like the last few paragraphs are, even if you're a committed democratic socialist like I, George Orwell, am, the most important thing is energy. And these coal miners are giving you energy. Without energy, the revolution stops. Without energy, all civilization stops. No matter how much we advocate for them or against them, they are going to go into that coal mine and they're going to give us coal because everything we want demands it. And the left has completely lost sight of that.
Alex Epstein. This is Alex Epstein's whole argument, which is let's pause for a moment and take account of all the things that fossil fuels give us, which is damn near everything. I mean, just look around right now where you're sitting right now, wherever you are in the world, look around and think about what got here because of fossil fuels. Everything, right? Things came on trucks and on ships and in airplanes to get here using fossil fuels. The internet, the electrical grid, fossil fuels. It's amazing. You know, medicine, hospitals. What happens to them hospitals when we cut the fossil fuels off? They go dark and people die. Then let's pause and account for all of the negative consequences of the use of fossil fuels. What is climate change actually manifested negatively in our world? Okay, so there's a couple degrees difference here and there in the temperature. There might be a little bit of sea level change, but nothing has gone underwater yet. Still, no one has died. No one has been displaced because of climate change. The NOAA has said many times that the hurricanes there is no relationship between climate change and the number of hurricanes or the intensity of hurricanes, no matter how much CNN tells you there is. What exactly have been the negative consequences of climate change that you can show me? Well, I can show you all kinds of stuff that have been the positive consequences of fossil fuels. So the argument to me, unless something dramatic happens in the next 5 to 10 years where I start to see, like parts of Miami or parts of New York City or some city in India even, going underwater. Okay, fine.
Like
we haven't even seen
5 years
close
ago.
to that. Right. Right. I mean, that was supposed to have been happening decades ago, not to mention the polar ice cap. They stopped talking about that, by the way. Remember, the polar ice cap was like daily news. Oh my God, we're going to lose the polar ice cap. And when that happens, we all die. They stopped talking about that. I guess it's not such an urgency anymore.
Okay, as we're wrapping up, we got 15 minutes left. Fascism has come to Italy. Benito Mussolini has reincarnated himself in a 40-year-old white woman. What do I think? Yeah, what do you think now that literally every country, Brazil, Hungary, Sweden, United States for 4 years, Russia, everybody's a fascist now?
She's not a fascist. She is nostalgic for fascism, very clearly. She's nostalgic for Mussolini, very clearly. The program I have seen articulated by her and by her party is not fascism. There are elements of it that are fascistic, no doubt. They are primarily an anti-immigration party. Secondarily, they are an anti-EU globalism party. They want to radically reduce or completely eliminate immigration, especially from dark countries. I do think there is an undercurrent of racism in it, but I'm not going to dismiss it because of that. I think it's totally legitimate to want to have less immigration in Italy. That's fine. It's not where I live. It's not my country. It's up to them. I am an open borders guy, but I'm not Italian. So that's their decision to make. Even if it is for racist reasons, I don't care. Like you can do whatever you want. That's very clearly what they care about the most. And then there's all this rhetoric about the EU and about making Italians into numbers and like denigrating Italian tradition and trying to impose this sort of universalistic, globalistic identity on Italians, which is just all full of nostalgia in various ways. As I said on Twitter, and I got attacked by all these right wingers. Italian national identity is really only about 200 years old. Yes, I know there were people who used the word Italian and Italy before then.
When Machiavelli was sucking up to the princes and telling them that they will rule all of Italy, that was pure Italian nationalism, and everybody in Italy believed in that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny enough, though, they didn't listen to him because they didn't unite and become Italy. Right. Weird. Yeah. So one philosopher said something about Italy in a book hundreds of years ago, and that's supposed to be representative of some like long tradition of Italian nationalism. No, anybody who knows the history of Italy knows that Italians identified more with their regions than with this fictitious Italian nation until the 1830s. My goodness.
Talk to any Italian. They will tell you the only time that
God.
Italy is united is during the World Cup.
Right. Oh, still to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It is just, so there's all sorts of nostalgia and, you know, myth making on both sides, really. But, you know, what's interesting is that apparently the Italian far right, you know, Meloni and company formed in the 1970s around a shared love of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And
you know about Tolkien's Catholicism, right?
No, not really.
Tolkien is a hardcore Catholic.
No.
And the Lord of the Rings were basically stories that he wrote to give his potentially secular grandkids the values of Catholicism in a fantasy world.
That explains it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Meloni's into it. Okay. Yeah. Meloni is super into The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. And apparently a lot of people in her party are too. And apparently sort of neo-fascists or far right people in Italy generally are as well. Yeah. So Mordor represents the EU and The Hobbit represents the beleaguered citizens of individual nation states who are oppressed by the great centralizing power, the great centralizing empire that resides either in Mordor. Was there a mountain or something? I forget.
Oh yeah,
Lord of the Rings,
right?
Mount Doom, yeah, which I guess is Brussels. You know, so I sort of interesting. I mean, this is one of the reasons I don't take her quite so seriously, and also because Italian politics is so volatile that it's very unlikely she'll be around for very long. Mm-hmm. But just listening to her, you know, I hear a whole bunch of anti-immigrant stuff, which again, it's not my bag, but I have no problem with it. It's fine. And I hear, you know, talk about the family, but what does that actually mean? Are there going to be welfare measures to support families like in Hungary, like Orban has in Hungary? Okay. I mean, is that fascism? They don't want to break from the EU. She supported the Ukraine war.
Yes, that's what makes me think she might be a fascist. Is why is she so pro Zelensky and pro that particular endeavor?
Well, yeah, we're on the side of NATO now.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, who's Mordor again?
Yeah,
and who's the Hobbit? Yeah. So, and speaking of that, you know, it's interesting that Russians are called orcs by anti-Russian racists now, especially in Ukraine. I don't know. And also she's come out in favor of the social credit system. I think some digital form of surveillance. She likes that, right?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to gauge her feelings on this. Like for the Green Pass, especially, I think that's why she was really popular. Is the Green Pass just crushed Italy? Telling Italians that they can't go to a restaurant is not going to be popular. Telling them that they can't go to their coffee shop without showing their papers, that's going to be incredibly unpopular. So she opposed that. But she herself got vaccinated, and yeah, she does seem to be for a lot of these globalist endeavors. Surprisingly, yeah, it's hard to find good information about this because she's kind of been on both sides of things a lot of times.
Yeah, but you know, she's sort of a youngish woman. She's very animated when she talks in an Italian style. She's, you know, charismatic, very energetic, very angry, and articulate. And, you know, the American right has been lapping her up lately. They love her. I mean, they love the little clips they see. Mm-hmm. What do they really think though? I mean, what do they really know? Do they really care about this stuff? I don't know. But I suspect she's going to be a flash in the pan. And I also don't really think she's not only not a fascist, she's not even a nationalist. If you're supporting the NATO war against Ukraine, how are you a nationalist?
Well, you could see that as
against Russia. Sorry.
Well, you can see that as extreme Ukrainian nationalism. Like she's in favor of Ukraine's in this conflict. She's siding with Ukraine's identity.
Oh, I see. Well, except she knows damn well that it's a globalist project. I mean,
you have to, yeah.
So what's really going on with Giorgia Meloni? I don't know.
Yeah, I do think I agree with you. I do think she'll be a flash in the pan, and I don't like whenever something happens and somebody makes a decent speech that somebody likes, everybody starts fawning over whoever it is, be it Bolsonaro, Viktor Orban, any of these people. And when will people learn the lesson that these politicians aren't going to save you? Like, isn't that the problem in the first place? Is placing your faith in politicians like this?
Well, I mean, she can kick out all the immigrants and she can stop immigrants from coming in. And I think that'll happen. That seems likely that there will be new laws limiting immigration to Italy. And we'll see how that plays out. We'll see if Italians really don't want Africans in their country, really don't want new immigrants. I don't know, like all the effects of immigration on the European countries. It's unclear to me. I know all the bad stuff. I know what the right wing has said about it. And I think a lot of that's true. But have there been positive economic consequences? I have to think so. Just like here in the United States, there have been many, many positive consequences. Also, in a lot of these countries, you can now eat food that's not just from that country. When I was in Greece recently, a few years ago, every single restaurant had the same food. It was great, loved it, fantastic Greek food, but that's all they had. There was because there's very little immigration in Greece, and so there's no other alternative cuisines. There's no alternative cultures. Is my point. Like we have here in such great abundance. And this is what I love about America, maybe more than anything, is the tremendous cultural diversity here. In France, where they do have a lot of immigrants, you can eat Vietnamese food, you can eat Senegalese food, you can eat all sorts of food from all over the world in France. And a lot of the French love that stuff. And they love the various cultures that have come into France, especially from West Africa, West African music. And dance is coming to France, and people love it. People love a lot of that stuff. So we'll see how serious they are about not wanting immigrants.
Yeah, and in France, a lot of the immigrants from the French-speaking colonies have assimilated very well into France.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But I like your attitude about this that a lot of Western liberals don't have. In that Italy's not my house, so who am I to judge, right? Like, yeah,
right. I mean, I thought about this today. Like, why don't we go find a planet? There must be some planet somewhere where someone's being oppressed, and let's go fly to that planet. Let's build a rocket ship to get to that planet and invade it and correct the injustice that's going on. That is actually the liberal imperialist mindset. You must go out and find oppression, and then bring justice to those people suffering under it. Wherever, they don't even know where it is. They just know that it's out there and they have to go find it. Let's go search for it.
Yeah.
So the idea that Italy is my business is just as silly as the idea that some planet in some distant galaxy is my business too. What's the difference? I don't live in either one. I have nothing to do with either one.
That Martin Luther King quote, right? An injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere.
There it is.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King, the arch progressive imperialist. He might have been, actually. He might have been. He enunciated that very well. That's right.
Yeah. And you see on Twitter, like, there's the take that, people are clamoring about a threat to democracy because a leader was democratically elected and the people have chosen this. And then the leftist response is, guys, it's not complicated. If the leader opposes democracy itself, it's a crisis for democracy. But do people have a right to choose what they want? Like, literally,
Yeah, right. Self-determination, unless they make the wrong choice. Unless they elect Giorgia Meloni. And what's her face? Ursula von der Leyen made that incredible threat when she said, we have tools to deal with it if they make the wrong decision in Italy.
Yeah, essentially
before the election, she said, we have tools to deal with it if they make the wrong decision.
essentially threatening sanctions, right? Pretty much,
Something.
yeah, or
Yeah,
whatever.
probably.
Mhm.
Right. Using economic power.
Mhm.
Wow. I mean, gotta love these people. At least they're speaking the truth.
Yeah. A little as we're wrapping up, I remember about a month or two ago during CPAC when Viktor Orban made his speech. I told you we were going to talk about him. We never had time to. How do you feel about Viktor Orban when you looked into him?
Mixed. I'm not blown away.
Mhm.
I think there's some interesting stuff. As usual with me and the right, I agree with almost all their critiques of the left
Mhm.
and of globalism in particular. But what they want to replace it with, it's not exciting to me. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's kind of scary.
And these people are politicians, and like we were talking about earlier with Ukraine and NATO and potential vaccine policies and potential central bank digital currencies and social credit scores. These people are politicians at heart, and they see solutions as political. So they are going to expand the state to accomplish their goals. They're not going to voluntarily give up power. That's not how this works.
Meaning they're sociopaths.
Yeah, by
Yes.
design, yeah.
Well, I mean, almost by definition, I think anybody who seeks political power like that, state power, power over masses of people, the power to regulate people's lives, the power to incarcerate people, to kill people, you have to be sociopathic on some level. You have to really just not feel other people's pain. You really have to not care fundamentally about other people's suffering. You really, it's a very particular personality that, they all belong to, regardless of political affiliation. The other thing about Orban, as I said sort of earlier, like what he's done is he's built a welfare state, a right-wing welfare state that supports, at least ostensibly, the family, but it's a welfare state. Why are we excited about that exactly? Giving state benefits, government benefits to people for being in nuclear families.
Yeah.
That does not seem very exciting.
Yeah, it's funny. You can get left-wingers to oppose the welfare state if you put it in that terms, that we shouldn't be social engineering to promote the nuclear family. But
right.
In the same sentence, you shouldn't be promoting a welfare state to destroy the nuclear family. No social engineering in government at all.
Good idea. No social engineering. That's my motto from now on.
We've been black-pilled a lot, and we've had no hope. Like on the show, we basically had no hope forward, and I want to get rid of the anxiety in the world out there somewhere by doing this show. And I think taking yourself less seriously, having fun, minding your own business, not hoping for some savior in politicians, and having some humility, at least not rushing to judgment, being curious and being empathetic is the only path forward I see.
Having a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And from now on, this show will have a sense of humor. We're going to work on that.
Yeah.
We're going to introduce humor back into politics, Michael.
And
that is the way. That is the only way forward. We've got to laugh at these people.
There's the George Orwell joke, and George Orwell quote: "In every joke is a tiny revolution," and I believe that so much. Yeah, that's my entire political philosophy.
Absolutely, nothing is more subversive than a well-told joke.
Yeah. And laughter is involuntary. That's my favorite thing about it, is that I always try to craft the joke to where it's so funny that even if you disagree with it, you have to laugh because your brain puts two and two together and makes you laugh.
That's right.
Yeah,
that is right. We're going to be the party of fun.
Yeah,
going forward. Yes, sir. Fun. All right, we got to go. We got Unregistered live. We're going to hang out on Zoom with everybody right after this. If you want to join us, just become a member of our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/unregistered. If you join at any level, you can hang out with us at Unregistered Live on Thursday nights right after Unreported. Michael, you are the man. I'm sorry about the technical issues. I will not make that mistake again. We'll get everything cleaned up, and we're going to have a lot of fun next week.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to be the sidekick, right? So like you're supposed to rip on me. You're supposed to like belittle me and make rumors that I'm gay, and like that's how this host and sidekick thing works. That's the funny dynamic.
No, dude. No, I'm not going to do that. You are the man. You're the host. You're the boss, and you make this happen. And my life without you is fucked. So no, that's not going to happen. We're gonna have other forms of humor. We're gonna have other ways of making fun of things. We're not going to make fun of you.
All right.
All right.
That
Peace,
means I have to
everyone.
make fun of you then. So
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
All good.
yeah,
All right, everyone. Bye.
cool, sweet. Oh, and there's going to be an RSS feed starting tomorrow, so I'm going to download the audio tomorrow, put this out
For
on
this
RSS
show.
feed. Yeah, for this show.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
Love
stay
it.
tuned.
Perfect. All right, man. Thank you.
Sweet. See ya.